Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. If you've got a soft spot for Fred Meyer, this one's gonna sting. Kroger says it plans to close 5 Fred Meyers and 1 QFC in the Seattle area. We'll hear from Seattle Times business reporter Paul Roberts about why in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. Boeing has reached a deal to sell more than 100 planes to Korean Air. The deal's worth more than $36 billion. It includes 777 and 737 jets, both of which are made in Everett, as well as 787 Dreamliners, which are made in South Carolina. The deal comes as Boeing continues its attempt to recover. The company lost more than $600 million in the second quarter of this year. Arts and culture groups across Washington state are getting a slice of a $10 million grant. The money's coming from the Allen Family Philanthropies and the Nonprofit Arts Fund. The grants range from $2,500 to $25,000. Here in Seattle, some of the grantees include the Northwest African American Museum, Spectrum Dance Theater, and Hugo House. And it'll still be warm today, but that heat advisory is over. We're back to mostly normal temps for the rest of the week with highs in the low 80s. The National Weather Service says it'll cool down this weekend even more with temperatures in the upper 70s. Check back for more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. After a failed merger between Kroger and Albertsons late last year, Kroger is following through with its threat to close stores. So far in the Seattle area, that means a QFC and 5 Fred Meyer stores, including one on Lake City Way. For people in Lake City, this mid-October closure is looming.
It's right in an area where there are a lot of apartment buildings, a lot of folks that are pretty low income live in the area. They're limited in terms of their resources. The bus lines run, so a lot of folks will come to this larger store.
That's Lauren Reed. They're the food access director at North Helpline, which operates a food bank right next to the Lake City Fred Meyer. Reed says North Helpline sees about 700 families every Saturday, and after getting some food at North Helpline's Lake City location, Fred Meyer is often a family's next stop.
They'll get what they can, and then they'll pop over to Fred Meyer and grab a couple of things. Like maybe we weren't able to have fish that day and they were really looking for fish. Maybe there's a special ingredient, a special spice, a special vegetable that they needed that's culturally relevant and familiar.
Reed says North Helpline also relies on stores in the area for grocery rescue. Fred Meyer helps stock the food bank with unsold products.
As they're cycling out stock for fresher produce and the more recent packaging of items, we'll get the stuff that otherwise would need to be sent back to the manufacturer. So daily we have volunteers that walk. For other stores, they'll drive over, but they'll walk over with a cart and pick up the extra stuff for us.
Reed says the upcoming closure makes things uncertain for North Helpline and Lake City. The Lake City location is just one of 60 Kroger stores that will be closing nationwide, including the 6 so far here in Washington. The company cites theft as a major reason for the closures, but also the state's challenging regulatory environment. It's notable that Washington was the first state to step in and sue to block the Kroger-Albertsons merger. Governor Bob Ferguson led the effort back when he was AG. Paul Roberts covers business and economics for the Seattle Times. He's here to talk about all things Kroger in Washington state. Paul, thanks so much for being here. Good to see you.
Good to be here, Trish. Thanks very much.
So people tend to be loyal to their grocery store for lots of different reasons, but Fred Meyer is unique even among grocery stores here. So let's talk about what makes them different from a Safeway or a Trader Joe's.
Or from a QFC, which Kroger also owns. They're basically a grocery store married with a variety store. So you can get household goods, furniture, office supplies, clothing, on top of a lot of groceries. Generally, many of the same items that you could get at a QFC in terms of groceries. So they have been the everything store for folks, kind of the equivalent of a Walmart or these days an Amazon. And so they have a very central position in a lot of these communities. It's your go-to store.
We mentioned at the top there that Fred Meyer, Kroger blamed theft and the state's regulatory environment for the closures. What did you find in your reporting?
They were very vague on that. When I went back and asked Kroger to share details on either the theft claim or the regulatory claim, crickets. Theft has been a huge issue for retailers across the board. Interestingly, when we checked with the Everett Police Department, they showed us statistics showing that theft and other crime in that area and at that store had dropped substantially from the sort of the pandemic peak when a lot of retailers were really seeing a ton of theft. It's always tough to know how much are retailers actually reporting to the police. So can you trust these police stats as being an accurate representation of what's actually going on? But, when you walk into a Fred Meyer, and particularly Fred Meyer, you will see that a lot of the stuff is locked up. You see cases and cases of these things where you have to find an associate, a sales associate and I think that's one of the issues they face is that if I'm a customer in the store and I have to ask an associate if I can find one to open up to get some cosmetics or whatever, I might just go shop somewhere else.
Certainly is a different vibe when you have to find somebody to open up a plexiglass case to get something out of, Paul. It definitely changes the shopping experience. What about the regulatory environment thing? What does that even mean? I have a hard time understanding that.
Yeah, they didn't give any clarification on that. I think they didn't really say that it's like in Washington because they're closing some of these locations in other states as well. But I mean, we could hypothesize, we could say maybe it's the fact that the state did go after the merger. It was the first, government agency to do that. It could be our higher minimum wage. It could be scheduling laws, that require employers to give notice to workers before they change their schedule, all sorts of things that would add cost to businesses. What occurred to me in the way that they sort of presented their statement was theft and regulation, right? Mm-hmm. They knew that would be the headline that most reporters and most newspapers and radio stations, everyone would run with because that really, gets attention. Yeah. And so that would they would be able to kind of lead the news cycle by saying, let's blame, the criminals and the politicians. And as a number of analysts that I talked to pointed out, that could be covering some operational challenges that Kroger was dealing with just in terms of how it's running its business.
Tuesday morning, the company notified the state's Employment Security Department of its intent to lay off 366 people, Paul. That is a lot of jobs. What have you heard from labor?
They kind of knew this was coming. It's negotiated between the union and the company in terms of what do we do with these workers. I mean, basically, they're all being offered positions at other Kroger stores. A number of labor folks I talked to and workers said that could be challenging depending on where the original store was that was closing and how far you had to go. And if you had a car, these tend to be sort of entry-level jobs. They don't pay a huge amount. This is an expensive area to live in. So certainly isn't going to be easy for a lot of these employees to just up and move to another store.
We talked about the uniqueness a bit of a store like Fred Meyer. Is there something to be said here about the sustainability of a large store like this? Let's talk more about the reality of the landscape of shopping these days.
Yeah, I think that, a couple of industry analysts have sort of observed that this may be an expensive, sort of retail model to keep running. What was initially attractive about it, basically you could find anything at the store and you could find usually 3 or 4 brands of each category. That sort of variety of inventory could actually be challenging because it takes a lot of labor to keep that kind of a selection up and running. And, a lot of consumers can be overwhelmed by that much choice. I mean, I think a lot of times folks really gravitate toward like the Trader Joe's model, which is just, we're going to curate inventory where we have a store brand or one, or 2 outside brands, but we've already made the decision on what we think is good. Costco does that a lot too. And I think consumers, once you trust the brand, you're kind of happy to have them say, this is the one that's worth getting, and not make you kind of stand in front of the aisle going, God, there's, like 11 different varieties of chicken soup with gluten-free noodles, So I think that's one issue that they face. These are big stores, typically. It's a lot of real estate. Trader Joe's, to use them as an example, again, they tend to be smaller stores, substantially smaller, and they have lots of labor, but they have huge volumes. So they're getting a lot of revenue per square foot. The other thing that's interesting is that QFC was purchased by Fred Meyer, and then Fred Meyer was purchased by Kroger. So QFC was always the stepchild here, where there was a lot of concern that it wasn't going to survive if the merger didn't go through. Because again, as we recall, one of the arguments against the merger was that Kroger had chosen its poor performing stores, namely QFC, to give to this third party, remember? And that was sort of one of the reasons like the merger didn't make sense. And so now we're sort of, well, okay, if that's true, then is QFC going to be the ones that are closed or spun off? But it turns out, at least in Washington, that we've had 1 QFC close and 5 Fred Meyers. Fred Meyer was supposed to be the partner that performed really well, and so it's hard to say.
What could be in the future here, Paul? Could more closures be coming? Is the future of Kroger in the Puget Sound area uncertain?
I don't know. I mean, again, we were sort of anticipating that QFC was the brand here that was at risk, not Fred Meyer. So that was a bit of a surprise. If theft truly is an issue, then I'm sure we can all think of Fred Meyers that have bigger theft problems than the locations that were closed. So if that continues to be an overriding factor in terms of choosing stores that stay or go, we might see some more there. The company is, they share nothing. In their defense, I mean, you want your store to be running as efficiently and as optimistically as possible until the very last minute. So you don't want your workers worrying about, I don't know, I think it's kind of a to be continued, kind of a stay tuned situation, unfortunately.
The Lake City Fred Meyer location is getting a lot of attention. What did you hear from people when you were out there talking with them?
I think, it was surprised. They were unhappy. They felt like, I think there's a grocery outlet like within a half a mile. There's other options. It's just, it blows up your routine if you've got to go to a different store.
A lot of seniors too.
Exactly. And folks that have gotten to know the employees at the store and vice versa. So there's a sense of community that they feel they're going to lose. Again, they acknowledge the theft issues and the sort of vagrancy that area is dealing with. And they saw that the store had been putting in steadily adding these measures, these security measures, but they sort of felt like they had worked and that the store was always busy, like the parking lot's full and the store is busy. And they're thinking, okay, how is this an underperforming location? I think that's what a lot of both workers and shoppers ask about their particular store. It's like, I thought this was doing okay. I got a number of readers writing in saying, the Redmond Fred Meyer, what theft? There's just not a big shoplifting problem over here. I mean, not that it doesn't exist, but that, okay, and that the area around that store was growing. They were adding housing. So it was kind of the perfect place, and you're going to close the grocery store. The strategy here is a little mystifying to folks.
Yeah. People get emotionally attached to their grocery store too, Paul. Routines are important, especially to older people, and people have an emotional attachment to their checkers, to their social connections. Yeah,
and I think that it's just, food is important. You get used to being able to count on, I don't have this ingredient for dinner that I'm cooking right now, and I know that the way things used to be, I could go up in 7 minutes, I can get the thing, but that store's closed. Now I got to figure out another store in another neighborhood. The stuff isn't in the same place when I walk in. It's going to be confusing. I'm going to be cranky, and I'm going to write a letter to the editor.
Well, and nobody needs that kind of stuff to think about. It's true. There's a lot of stuff to think about, and that's just the kind of thing that just tweaks your day a little bit. Have you thought about what it would be like if your go-to grocery store closed?
I mean, yeah, I do worry about that because my go-to is a QFC. And, again, it was, so I check a lot with the employees. Have you heard anything? And there's a Trader Joe's about a half a mile away, which I could go to, but that's not full service. There's a Safeway in Ballard. I mean, I do have a map of what I do, and I already do I have a very detailed strategy for shopping that has me going to several different stores depending on what I need to get. But it would be a bummer if I couldn't. Like right now, I can just walk to the QFC, and if that was gone, it'd be like, I'd survive, obviously, and there's other neighborhoods that have far fewer options, right? So I've got no complaints, but it would be a big inconvenience. And I'd miss those people, and I know they'd miss me.
They sure would, Paul. Paul Roberts covers business and economics for the Seattle Times. Really appreciate your reporting. Thanks.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to Seattle Now. Today's episode was produced by Vaughn Jones. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Andy Hurst, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.